Well, voting districts have completed counting thus far. To help make sense of this, we are now joined by SABC News research editor Dr. Ronesh Dhawraj. Dr. Dhawraj, thank you so much for your time. In fact, let's start with the comments that were made there by the Treasurer Secretary General of the EFF, saying that it is still early days and that political parties will gauge at 90%, in terms of where they're going. Do you think that's not too late, perhaps?
No, not at all. I think 90% is way too late. I think we should get a clearer picture from 75% onward. Remember, I think most of the rural areas have been coming in thick and fast from yesterday. The outstanding areas are in the metros. If you look at the metros, we're looking at around 11 million people, 11 million registered voters in the metros. That's around 40% of the registered voters that actually were permitted to cast a vote in these elections. And so if you look at the metro populations, obviously Buffalo City, it's around 425,000. Nelson Mandela Bay Metro in the Eastern Cape, 601,000. Mangaung in the Free State, 429,000. Then the big ones in Gauteng, we've got Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane. Johannesburg, let me just quickly check, I must not lose my train of thought, 2.3 million in Johannesburg. So obviously here we're waiting for the strongholds of the ANC, strongholds of the EFF, townships in Johannesburg. Same with Ekurhuleni. In Ekurhuleni we're looking at 1.6 million. Similar scenario in Tshwane, 1.6 million. So here the township vote is very important, and I think that's the main thing that's outstanding. If the ANC is looking a little low at this juncture, I think wait for those votes to come in from these huge metros. Then eThekwini in KZN, very, very important for the province of KZN. Here they've got around 1.9 million registered voters in that single metro, and the big one in the Western Cape is the Cape Metro. We know that the Western Cape always is very quick in terms of declaring those VDs, counting those votes, and they come in thick and fast as usual in previous elections as well. But Cape Town has around 2.1 million registered voters, and if we look at the Western Cape, the total registered population in the Western Cape is 3.3 million. So a huge chunk of that registered voter is in the Cape Metro, 2.1 million. So very, very early days. We're around 60% now. Around 70% we should get a clearer picture of how South Africans voted on Wednesday that just passed.
And in fact, we heard that bell not too long ago, and we are at least at 66% of those VDs counted then and of course audited. So we're edging closer then by your account to that 70% mark. And just looking at these numbers and what you're saying in terms of political parties having to gauge at around about 70 upwards in terms of that. Looking at the national picture and what the CSIR is projecting, as well as what others are projecting, in terms of the turnout, they are putting it at anything between 55, 56, 57, 58% in terms of voter turnout. Now, I mean, if that happens, that is way below at least what the IEC expected, and at least what we saw in 2019 with 66% of the voter turnout. And I do remember in earlier conversations that you had also indicated, right about that mark. What are we looking at there? And can we, at this point, start to gauge what that national voter turnout is?
Well, thank you, Nancy. And I still stick to my prediction. Sorry, it's been a very, very long week. I still stick to my prediction of 50 to 59% for turnout for these elections. If we look back at 2019, the lowest turnout for a general election, we touched 66%. In that election, we saw three provinces, very instrumental, important provinces. KZN had a 10% lower turnout than 2014. Mpumalanga as well, Mpumalanga and Free State as well dropped by 10%. The Western Cape as well was low. Gauteng dropped by 5%. But I think what we're going to expect in terms of turnout for these elections is it will be lower than 66% in 2019. It will be much, much lower than that. And I think the main reason for that...
Before you go into the reasons, Dr. Dhawraj, let's pause that now and go to, in fact, some of the provinces. Of course, our reporters are, spread across the country, just crunching those numbers for us from various vantage points.